A compelling detective story, a cloak and dagger action, and a romantic drama, all these stories were taken from real life. The history of Kazakhstan is inseparable from the world history. Reflections on history, our version.
The Spice Road. The ancient settlement Botai, not far from Petropavlovsk. They, the citizens of Botai, dug a hole with a diameter of about 50 centimeters, 30 centimeters deep, then set the vessel in the center of it. Archaeologist Victor Zybek tells how canned food was made in the Neolithic period. They put stones around the vessel and the rest of the hole to the top. Thus, the vessel was surrounded by the stones. Then they light the fire around the vessel. Was it only meat in it, or did they add some herbs or something? Anything that they could use. Was there already salt? There was no salt. There was no salt, but archaeologists often find traces of roots and spices. For example, cumin, garlic, saffron, and even cloves were found in the Neolithic. Use of food additives, spices, incense, saffron drawings in caves is ancient history. It even began before the Neolithic period and continued successfully after it. The elusive way of spices and the steppes are a mystery. This is an enormous area. China, India, and the Central Asian countries. For example, Kazakhstan. Central Asia, it's only a small part of these roads, as branches of the Silk Road go to the south of India. Of course, spices have always come from here, including through Delhi. Chapter 1. The Smell of History. The bright taste of India and its unique flavor. Delhi, the main bazaar street, so it's called. Half of the world, and even more, aware for so long that you cannot specify the exact date. India, 1,000 years ago and today, is holding the palm of victory for spice leadership. By transit through the steppe, leaving a light scent of mystery. For example, in the Kazakh tradition, a newborn baby after bathing in salt water was covered with oil mixed with cloves and ginger. It's unknown when this tradition was born. The exchange always existed on this site of paths. Long before the Silk Road, there was a regional exchange. Speaking of transcontinental contact, it existed from about the 1st century AD to the 10th, 12th centuries. Goa State, spices, plantation, and dedication to tourists. There are about 109 kinds of spices in the world, 75 of which are produced in India. And everything is very simple, they grow here. This thin and tall tree is a clove. By the way, cloves ready for use should be brown, and better not to buy black cloves because there's no oil in them. For several centuries, the area of the spice route was controlled by Arab merchants. They told scary stories so that nobody walked their way. Bloodthirsty birds live on the road, and cinnamon grows in a country of huge snakes. It's cinnamon. We all know that cinnamon is a tree bark. Commonly, they use trees which have grown for 5 or 6 years. Then they cut the bark at 1 meter from the ground, dry it, and make the sticks. And then they make oil from it. But oil is made not from the bark, but from the body of the tree. It's very good for arthritis and diseases of arthrosis. And no snakes around. Here you can see the second most expensive spice in the world. There is a liana over there. See it? It looks like a zigzag. This parasite liana is vanilla. Vanilla is also considered a spice. In Madagascar lives a hummingbird and it pollinates the vanilla. Here in India there are no hummingbirds, so they're pollinated manually. These roots are, of course, for tourists. Production plantations are also here, not far from the tourists' one. For centuries, only very rich people could afford herbs. For example, in the UK in the 12th century, you could buy 8 cows for just a pound of nutmeg. However, before you have to reach the UK. Chapter 2. In a Spicy Swirl. A caravan means the same thing for them that a pack of animals does for us. Fine spices like nutmegs, cloves, ginger, cinnamon and more are brought from India. Rey González de Clavijo, Travel Diary. The spice route, of course, did not begin only in India. Other sources were Persia, Sri Lanka, and in China the goods were distributed. Caravan routes came to Urumqi. Here goods were distributed and went to the other cities. The way to India through Afghanistan to China and back was called a hanging pass due to the narrow trails and dangerous mountain serpentines. But caravans were going forward. Spices were also brought from the east. Indeed, spices became the reason for the colonization of the eastern countries, such as India. They were very popular in the west. History with a scent of spice, the 1st century AD. It is known from the Chinese sources about migration processes of Huizhe from Central Asia to India, where they created the famous Kushan Empire. The new kingdom quickly began to gain strength in new territories, including in the north of India. This is exactly where Delhi is today. Caravans with Indian goods, spices, tea, gold, silk, well, anything always went from here to Central Asia to our region. So the interaction always existed. People, countries, caravans twisted in the spicy whirlwind of history. By the 2nd century, the kingdom of Kushan was occupying area from the Aral Sea to the Ganges. And for the first thing they did was establish trade relations with India, China, the Roman Empire. This trade route was commonly named the Great Silk Road. Through all the 7 rivers, through East Turkestan by the Bosches, there was no single way. There were hundreds of these pathways and tracks. Anyway, it's considered the main direction and not just one path. The era of Kushans is considered as the highest peak of evolution of the ancient world of the steppe. New cities were created, trade was developing. At this time, the Roman Empire was the main consumer of silk, as well as spices. And at different times, we see strengthening of one branch of the Silk Road and the weakening of the other. This shows the political situation. Like, for example, Marco Polo and his father, they could not go by a certain route, so they changed their route due to the political climate.
The Silk Road, India was an important part of it, as was China. And I think Central Asia was the hub of the Silk Road. And of course, these relationships go back a very long time, even before Marco Polo.
By the 5th century, the spice trade with Europe was reduced, and all because the political situation had changed. Kushans are in the past, the Roman Empire collapses, along with a European direction. But by the 6th century, all came back, and again, medication and delicious food and flavored oils for beauties were needed. By defeating Eftalites and northern Chinese kingdom Turkyuts, achieved not only political, but also economic power, since in their hands was the great caravan route. From the China Sea to the borders of Persia, it was 150 days away, and from here to the Roman border, another 80 days. Lev Gumilyov, Ancient Turks. For 2 centuries, Turks controlled the trade. Pay the 10 part of the pack and go on through the controlled territory. During the reign of Istemi Hagan, on the way to India, passed through this land of Taraz. But it took another couple of centuries. The price of Chinese silk began to fall. Its mystery was solved, and now in the Byzantine Empire, Syria, and even on the banks of the river Talaz, they began to produce the magical tissue. In later stages, there was no more of a Silk Road. It is generally the route trade to China and India. If there is demand, there's a product. So Europe again tasted spices, and then incredible things happened. Chapter 3, The Spicy Taste of Money. This is how black pepper is growing. It is small. By the way, in France there was a penalty for faking black pepper, and the penalty was equal to 60 kilograms of silver. And here in Germany, even more for faking saffron. They burned the criminal at the stake or buried him alive in their ground, along with the counterfeit goods. Interesting, until the French Revolution in the 18th century, traders of spices ruled the French Chamber of Weights and Measures. Only they had the most accurate tools.
For Indians, when we read history, we learn about how the Europeans came to India because of spices.
Another plantation, Sri Lanka. Arab merchants that invented stories about snakes were supplied by spices from here. And then, further up the chain appeared Indian, Chinese, Sogdian merchants, Turks' fees, and now the cost of the pepper increases by, not by 100 times, but by 1,000 or more. Spices were very expensive. This could build a great business. And it should be known that the spices which are growing on the islands of India and the East went through a variety of hands before reaching our territories. Martin Beheim, Earthborn Apple. 12 predatory hands were counted by the German scientist Beheim, but despite such an impressive number of intermediaries, trading spices in the Middle Ages was extremely profitable. The first, saffron, second, vanilla, and third, green cardamom, fourth, cloves, and the fifth is cinnamon. These are the top hit charts of expensive spices. One of the oldest is saffron. Its price today comes up to $2,000 per kilogram. This crocus is a flower. In general, it doesn't grow anywhere in the world except for the north of India and Kashmir. The king of spices and the spice of kings. Saffron is very good for fat meat. This was known even by the cooks of Turk Hagan. Again, the recipe. From the shaker of the universe, ginseng, ginger, and honey. The favorite tea of Genghis Khan. The Golden Horde period is a renaissance of the spice trade. Major distributors in Europe were Pisa, Venice, and of course Genoa. Well, where are elephants from in Genoa? From Africa or India, for example? And in the 14th century, the plague came to Europe from India. All European chronicles of the time agree that the Genoese merchants brought it with the spices, and they offered medicine at the same time: nutmeg, rosemary, cloves. Look, the fruit. See, it's round and lime as a lemon. It will be the size when it grows ripe. It will open up, and inside there will be 2 spices, a flower and a nut. How is the nutmeg called? Nutmeg. Incidentally, this was the second coming of the plague in Europe. The first happened in the 6th century, and they brought it also from faraway India through Turkish land, but this time by Byzantine merchants. And in the 15th century it was brought by the seaway. Vasco da Gama, Magellan, and Columbus did their best, and steppe transit slowly fell to disrepair. Epilogue, a riddle with a spicy aftertaste. The great spice route left traces all over the world since Neolithic times. In the national cuisines, it's hard to imagine Viennese strudel without cinnamon, Turin chocolate without vanilla, or Uzbek pilaf without turmeric.
And of course, the spices make them tastier.
But here's a puzzle. All Kazakh dishes are made with a minimum of spices. Perhaps only black pepper does not spoil the taste of beshpamak, sirn, and kardak. More than that, according to tradition, it's not often used. And this is despite the fact that for centuries and millennia, the spice route lay through the Kazakh steppe. Isn't it amazing? Maybe that is because the life of a nomad never had a flat aroma. It is the ability to let through the caravans, the ability to pass through themselves, to try everything, to know everything, but follow their own path.